As this government shutdown drags on, it's inflicting more and more pain on federal employees the longer it lasts because they're directly impacted. They have to go without pay until the shutdown ends, and some of them have to keep working, the ones who are considered accepted, and work without pay during the shutdown. And lawmakers have taken notice of that, and more bills are being introduced that are designed to help federal employees the longer the shutdown goes on. And I've put together a list of some of these bills that have been introduced recently. If you're a federal employee, they're worth watching. Some of these bills impact federal employees more globally because they apply to the whole federal workforce, whereas some just impact a small subset of federal employees. But let's get into the list here. I'll go over each one briefly. And I'm sure this is by no means a comprehensive list. The information is also changing frequently. But if any of you have any others that you know of that are helpful for federal employees to know about, then please, by all means, leave a mention of them in the comments. I'll start off with one that was just introduced today, and I'm recording this on October 23rd. It's called the True Shutdown Fairness Act. It was introduced by Senator Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat from Maryland. And what this bill would do, it would pay all federal employees, both those who are accepted and those who are furloughed, as well as military service members and federal contractors. It also would prohibit the layoffs that the Trump administration has proposed via reduction in force, or RIF, while the government is shut down. The second bill is called the Federal Employee Civil Relief Act. That was introduced by Senator Brian Schatz, a Democrat from Hawaii. What this legislation would do is it would protect furloughed federal workers and contractors from eviction, foreclosure, repossession, and other financial hardships during and 30 days after a government shutdown. The next one up is called the Shutdown Guidance for Financial Institutions Act. This one was introduced by Congressman Suhas Subramaniam, a Democrat from Virginia. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. And this bill would require federal financial regulators to issue guidance to financial institutions within 180 days of enactment, instructing them to recognize the hardships faced by consumers and businesses during a government shutdown. This guidance would include modifying loan terms, extending credit, and preventing adverse information from harming affected consumers' creditworthiness. It would apply to both federal employees and contractors. Another one that's been introduced recently is called the Federal Worker Childcare Protection Act. This one was introduced by Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat from Minnesota. And this legislation would ensure that federal employees who are furloughed or required to work without pay during the ongoing lapse in federal funding are eligible to be reimbursed for childcare expenses that are incurred during the shutdown. Next up is called the Make America Govern Again Act, or MAGA Act for short. And this bill was introduced by Congressman John Larson, Democrat from Connecticut. And what it would do is it would ensure that all federal employees, both military and civilian, are paid during the government shutdown, and would also withhold pay from members of Congress, the president, vice president, cabinet, and White House political appointees. And that's because Larson says that it's not fair for federal employees to go without pay during the shutdown while members of Congress are getting paid. So that's the premise behind that legislation. Another bill is called the Emergency Relief for Federal Workers Act. This was introduced by Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia. And what this bill would do is it would establish government shutdowns as financial hardships, waive the 10% early withdrawal penalty for TSP withdrawals, that's the thrift savings plan, and allow for fund recontribution at a future date. It would also ensure access to TSP loans, suspend loan payments during shutdowns, and prevent missed payments from becoming taxable distributions. There's a lot to this bill. It gets into a lot more details surrounding using the TSP for financial hardships during the shutdown, and I've written an article on it that goes into much more detail. and I'll be sure to include a link to that in the description for those of you who would like more information. The next bill was introduced by Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas. I don't have a name for this bill. There's not one that I can find. It's fairly recently introduced, but it's Senate Bill number 3031, and it would pay air traffic controllers and TSA baggage screeners, among other, quote, essential operational personnel at the Federal Aviation Administration. So while some of the other bills have more globally accounted for pay for the federal workforce, this one is more specific to the FAA specifically. We also have the Eliminate Shutdowns Act. This was introduced by Senator Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin, and in the House by Congressman Dusty Johnson, a Republican from South Dakota. So there's companion legislation in both the House and the Senate. And this is perhaps the bill of all bills because it would, as the name implies, eliminate the possibility of a government shutdown completely. What this bill would do is it would trigger an automatic 14-day continuing resolution to continue funding at the previous year's levels in the event that a lapse of appropriations occurs. It also would automatically renew every 14 days until Congress passes a new appropriations bill or continuing resolution. And lastly, I wanted to mention the Shutdown Fairness Act. This was introduced by Senator Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin. And what this bill would have done is ensured that accepted federal employees who were required to work during the government shutdown without pay continue to be paid. So just a quick reminder, accepted federal employees are required to work, they're not furloughed, and they get back pay once the shutdown ends. Furloughed federal employees do also, but they get furloughed, and that's the difference. So Johnson thought that was particularly unfair, and he wanted to ensure that federal employees who are being required to work get paid. The reason I say it would have done that is the Senate voted on this on today, the day I'm recording this, Thursday, October 23rd, and it failed to pass in a 54 to 45 vote. I hope you found this information to be helpful. As I said, these are some bills I came across recently, and I wanted to make sure that you were aware of them. Certainly, the longer this shutdown goes on, if it were to last several more days or even weeks, then they become even more relevant. And also, the longer it goes on, we'll probably see more and more bills like this introduced, since, again, federal employees are among those most directly impacted and harmed by a government shutdown. And even if the shutdown ends, they're not completely irrelevant. If they were to become law, the way many of these work is they would apply to future shutdowns as well, and not just the current shutdown. And we actually saw that with the 2019 bill, the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act, that ensured that federal employees are guaranteed retroactive pay in the event of a shutdown. Prior to passage of that bill into law, there was not a guarantee of that. And Congress had to approve back pay for federal employees each time a shutdown took place. They did in pretty much all cases. I don't think I recall a case where they ever were denied back pay, but now it's set into law. So that's why they're worth watching. Like I said, I hope you found this information helpful. Thank you for watching.